was, when did I start questioning whether I was living in my truth? And I don't think I ever stopped questioning that. I think from the very beginning of my relationship, I, of course, had to be thinking about that. I thought that, I had made my mind up on who I wanted to be. I had begun telling the closest people around me, that I was into guys, including Brandi, of course. And again, I just, there was something about the feeling of having a woman for once in my life that I was honest with about that, as I had not been with the previous relationships. And those all ended in a fucking, burning, flaming dumpster fire. And so two of my ex girlfriends actually slept with my dad. And so that will really definitely hurt your ego, right? And I never felt like I was enough for any of them. This was the first woman that I was truly honest with and said, "Hey, I like guys." And she gave zero fucks. She saw something in me that she wanted, that she wanted to be around. And I think, I said this in the last question, but there was a point in time where I was like at a party with Brandi, and she was, like almost getting jealous, right? And I remember going out into the street and like sending her home and saying, like, "I'm never going to be with you. You understand that, right?" She didn't give up, right? She didn't take no for an answer. And I say that jokingly, right? Obviously, I entered into this willingly. She didn't propose to herself, but I always questioned whether I was living in my truth, but that felt so good. What we had felt so good. I had never had someone that felt so warm before. It was almost like, not in a creepy way, but like a maternal love, right? And still today, it very much feels like that. Like Brandi feels like, right? It is the real feeling of what it feels like that someone loves you unconditionally. And she still does today. She loves me for all of my craziness. She fully just wants to see me happy, and is just an amazing human, And so, who wouldn't want that? Who wouldn't want to be attracted to that? And I was attracted to that. The old people pleasing, trauma filled child that I was all about people pleasing. And I think in my entire relationship, even times where I have been sexual with men, my focus is always about serving them, if you will, right? And so, I I was attracted to that. I was attracted to the fact that she was attracted to me. Our sex was incredible. And, not that there wasn't, plenty of put a baby in me nights, I was 27, 28, 29, 30 years old, whatever. And, we had a lot of fun. How we decided we were going to be parents was a little bit different of a story. And that is, Brandy, actually, we had just gotten back from Vegas, a nice party with her mom, not party, but, a nice, trip with her mom. And one of her friends came over, Heike, she's still a very good friend to us today, and said, like, "Bitch, you're pregnant." And I remember them coming up to my office at our house, and I was like, "Why are you guys bothering me?" It was weird that somebody was upstairs in our house, and they were in there taking a fucking pregnancy test. And then she came into my room and to the office and said, like, "We're pregnant." And the next day, I was at work at Subway, and I remember getting a text from Brandy saying, she went to the doctor, she had an ultrasound, and I'm pretty sure we already knew at that point that it was a girl, or maybe very shortly after that. She was actually 17 and a half weeks pregnant. So we had about 6 months left to get her done and get ready. So it was a whirlwind. I think I proposed to her shortly after that. And we got married on the beach in Maui with Brandy's parents alone. And that is kind of how we've lived our entire relationship. We said fuck you to everybody who knew that I was gay before. We expected them to forget about that, or if they didn't, we expected them never to talk about it, and they didn't. And the people who did were no longer in our life. And so we've always kind of marched to the beat of our own rum-pa-bum-bum, if you will. We've always done what we wanted to do and blazed our own trail, and we don't really give a fuck if people understand us, and we never have. We also bounced out of Oregon in the same way, right? 9 years ago, we said peace out to the rain. We moved away from all of those people that did know us for the most part. The ones that are true friends, OGs, day ones, are still around in our life, and they come visit us here in Arizona. But we started a new life for ourselves, and look at what we have done in that time. So, in a lot of ways, it has always been a lavender marriage in that it was about concealing my identity. I think Brandy definitely, was in love with me as I was her, and I think now our love has grown into a new marriage, if you will. We really looked at, everything when we were going through this divorce, and in our minds, we kind of started a new marriage. We talk a lot about that in a couple of podcast episodes that we filmed, but it was sitting down and looking at and saying, like, this is what works in our relationship. This is what has gotten us 15, 16 years into this. And when you really think about it, we both knew the whole time, I never questioned, well, I always questioned whether I was living in my truth. And when it became too much for me to deal with was during COVID, right? It was when I didn't have any of those outside outlets to run to. It was just me, TikTok, and the TV screen in front of me. And I remember laying there on the couch, like literally in a fucking daze, right? Just like not even listening to the words that were coming out of that screen and just ruminating almost, if you will, in my head. And it was never about me thinking about what do I need in my life or what am I missing or imagining this world where I was running around with some beautiful fucking man. It was thinking about what I was robbing from them. I was fully deep in my, alternate fucking persona, if you will, trying to be everything that I needed to be to fit in suburbia with our with our friends. My daughter's best friends parents were our really good friends across the street, and I did all the things. I pretended to like football. I was always self-conscious about every single word that came out of my mouth. And when you live like that, you literally wake up every single day and tell yourself, I am not good enough, because you're thinking about what you're doing. And I also say this a lot, I became a manipulator, right? Like, that's really truly what you are. If you are a people pleaser and you are trying to be what everybody wants you or around you wants you to be, you're actually a manipulator. You're the one that is manipulating other people. And so how does that feel? And so it got to a point where, it was impacting my mental health. It was impacting every area of my life. And just like everything in my life that's ever been a challenge, I've had to overcome that. And I had to overcome that. And I hired a coming out coach. His name was Rick Clemens. He was a 40 plus coming out coach. And he was the first person that probably ever asked me, like, what are your core values? And as I sat there and thought about that, right? What am I about? And that's why I'm so about creating a brand now, creating a mission statement, having core values, being about something, being able to reference something that is like, this is who I am. I think we should all create a brand and think about our lives in that way. And when you do that, you also think about your life as a business, right? And so, what is my business about? What will I accept and not accept? What are my non negotiables in life? I didn't know what those were because I was so busy being what everybody else wanted me to be, just so that I could have this life. Because all I ever really wanted at the end of it all was Brandi in London, and to keep them. And so I put a plan together with Rick Clemens, who was my coming out coach. And, he really made me look at the mistakes that he made when coming out, what he regretted about being a father, and how that changed his relationship with his daughters. And I knew I did not want to make those mistakes. And so, it has really truly been a 5-year journey at this point to come out in all of the various stages that that means, which I'll talk about, and to maintain exactly what I have today, which is my life, my family. My girls are still by my side. I'm living an authentic life. I'm sharing that with the world and showing that as a gay man married to a woman, you don't have to abandon everything that worked in your life. We are much healthier than most heterosexual, I like to call them legacy marriages. And so that is why I do what I do.